Hi everyone, it's Jan from Jan Plans Things, and welcome to my Plan With Me video for this week. Sorry it's a little bit late. I was in New Zealand for most of last week, so I'm a little bit jet lagged. Why is there even a time difference between Melbourne and New Zealand? I have no idea. But this week, the concept of my weekly spread is to basically show what happens when Humphrey gets a raise. So his cut is like the new fandangled shiny version of last week's cut. I mean, Hermione's still hanging out on the top, but there's a few extra bits, and there's also like, extra ice cream and decoration, and it's just a little bit bigger, so I'm having a little bit of fun carrying the theme through. It's like, you did renovations on your cart. So also from that, I kind of wanted to draw something a little bit similar again, just to practice my skills. And I found it was quite useful because last week I think the spread took just over an hour. This week it was less than 45 minutes. So I feel like doing the same thing and also just practicing also helps you improve throughout the week. So, and it also, translates to speed and everything. So I'm getting a little bit faster at sketching out cakes and sweets and just little carts in general. And I'm also staying with this kind of like vertical grid layout. And it's I actually really enjoyed using it last week, which is why I'm doing a similar type layout this week. The only difference is I've split it back up into the sixes using the right hand part of the page, but the thing is I have had a few people ask me if they wanted to do a seventh day so that they could split the weekend, because they do a lot on the weekend, in which case I would make the image a bit smaller and then just have it mostly on the left and at the bottom, so that you could get that extra day above the cart. Sorry if you hear any bells in the background. Humphrey refuses to leave me today, so he's just kind of just hanging next to me, but he's got his bells on, so he's a little bit naughty and loud today. I've also decided to have a little bit of fun with the date bubbles. So I've got Tuesday sitting in a bus stop sign, so kind of like the sign that sits next to the little cart. I also added a little handle with a bell, probably because I was thinking of Humphrey when I was sketching it. Kind of like when they're carrying the cart along, you can hear the bell going, and it's kind of showing that the cake cart has arrived. Although, that being said, I'm not quite sure why I decided to do a cake cart, because they wanted a truck last week, so maybe they got slightly demoted. Probably didn't think that through completely. So if you're interested to know what type of materials I'm using, I'd recommend checking out the Plan With Me video for February, the monthly setup, because I do show in just a little bit more detail what materials I'm using. I am still using the same palette that I set up all those weeks ago, and I'm just letting it dry out in between. I have a couple of these plates. I bought them for like $7 from Muji or something. So, and I find them really, really great because they're white, and that means that I can mix the colors and they stay quite bright on the page. So, sorry, bright on the plate, which means that they're pretty true to color when I paint on them. The only thing is the Archer and Olive paper is very, very white, and I heard I have come across a little bit of issues with it in terms of the fact that when you paint not fast enough in the Archer and Olive, you can kind of see the hard line to the side. It's very similar to my watercolor tutorial in the Leuchten. It's just a slightly different look because the edge isn't as hard, and the pigment does sink into the paper a bit more, so you might have to build it up a little bit if you want it to have really, really bright colors. I am using still the Japanese paints for this month, mainly because I feel like the Japanese paints, these are Holbeins, are a little bit brighter in terms of their pigmentation compared to the European paints, probably because of the subject matter that Japanese paints like to have, and that's a similar thing I'm finding with my Korean paints as well. And I'll have to do a proper breakdown of the paints that I bought in Korea for you guys to see as soon as my intensive workshop at the university is over. It's like I have to stop playing with my cat for 2 weeks and become a professional again. But it's good. Everyone should adult all the time. But yeah, so I have been using a similar technique in the to the past. So I'm just building up a soft amount of color first, and then I'm going through and just adding depth and shadow using a grey. Sometimes I'm cheating this week and I'm using a black because I find the black is a little bit more warm than using a blue grey, and that's just because I wanted to kind of just warm up the cart a little bit compared to before. And because the paper is like, it does leave a mark where you do the brush, that means like when I do like the love heart on the shell on the roof, it stays there. So if I want to paint over it, it's okay because it acts translucent and it doesn't buff away. Whereas with some watercolor paper, you can buff that line away. I don't find that you can do that with this notebook. That being said, I still find the Archer and Olive the best notebook to use if you don't like ghosting because the paper is so thick. I just don't think that if you're wanting to have it act exactly like watercolor paper, it doesn't, because the paper is a bit different. However, I think it's like the perfect medium if you're going to use gouache or something like that. And I think Bonnie from Archer and Olive does a lot of her spreads using gouache because of how vibrant and white it is on the page. So that's just something you have to think about when you're using a notebook. You can't quite use everything the same as you would if you're using traditional art materials. You do have to adjust your technique as you go along, regardless of whether or not it's a great notebook like this one with really thick paper or something like the LT which has thinner paper. But I find that because the paper is coated, the colors do look a little bit more vibrant on the LT straight up. But you can achieve something a little bit similar by slowly building up the pigments. So it really just depends on what type of notebook you like, and your pros and cons out of both of them. A lot of you ask me if I prefer the LT or the Archer and Olive, and I do say there's pros and cons of each. The main thing is that the Archer and Olive for me, I think, is that there's less pages. I think the LT almost has double the amount of pages. So it really just depends what you think about. The other thing is, a lot of people really don't like the creamy paper on the LT, but I love the creamy paper. I think it makes my spreads look kind of warm and welcoming. So that is also a difference. The Archer and Olive paper is very, very bright white. So that's what I find mostly different between those two notebooks. But I do have to adjust my watercolor technique for both of them. So it's not like it won't be the perfect thing straight away. With the Archer and Olive though, you can be quite lazy. You can just layer on the water and it just doesn't bleed through, which is, very, very excellent if you're used to doing big washes and things like that on your spread. I'm just going through now with the black and grey and just adding a little bit more depth, just especially behind Humphrey, just to add like a little bit of, a little bit of a 3D effect to the overall cut. I'm not doing too much in terms of shading this time around. Just keeping it really, really simple. I'm just shading everything to the left of an object just to add depth. I'm not really calculating like reflections or sunlight or anything like that, because I kind of like the simple cartoon look of the illustration. I've also got a whole bunch of like stickers on the front of the cart, and also just a little bit of like a heart print, because it is Valentine's Day this week. Kind of just wanted to carry the the love theme all the way through. The other thing that I've noticed while doing something like this is that I do like adding the smaller details, like kind of like the stripes and the hearts, and that kind of tricks your eye into thinking the image is a little bit more detailed than it actually is. And it's a fun way to do it because you can just layer on the print and everything. So like that pale heart on the back of the card and like the stripes on top of the flags. I'm also finding the best way to tie the illustration together is to do a little wash in terms of the background. So what I've been doing the past few weeks is just doing a little like sap green, just like splotches for the foliage, and then also some sky. And I'm finding that that kind of grounds the image a little bit more, and it doesn't make it seem like it's floating on the page, and it feels like the layout kind of is tied together overall. And I really like it also with the text on top after you fill it out over the weekly, because it just kind of feels like an illustrated picture book, because you know how sometimes you've got double sides of the picture book and you've got the story on the side, and I think that really helps it all tie together. So that's why I'm actually bringing the sky out a little bit more this week and just adding it also to the right hand side of the page, whereas like I normally kept everything to the left previously. But I really like how that looks overall. I did find that the greenery looked like it was a little bit floating, so I've gone back with my I'm going back with my Rotring pen and then just adding a few little quick dashes around with the greenery to make it look like it's, you know, meant to be there a little bit more. I was trying to make it just have the without the black lines around the foliage, but I found that it looked a little bit floaty, as if there was like a weird green cloud at the back. So I found that just adding those few little hooks and what I'm doing right now really just kind of tied the overall illustration together. But that is pretty much concludes this week's weekly. I'm really enjoying this theme. It's so fun and cute, and I'm just loving flicking through my my journal this week. And you know, it's always good to bring your cats with you everywhere. But I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys soon. I'm hoping I can get to this again next week, but if I'm too busy, I might not be able to film it, but I will try and update my Instagram as often as possible. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Bye!